Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. And I can't believe I'm saying this, it's September already, which means in just a couple of weeks school starts, fall semester at the Wellness Farm Institute, and we are offering some marvelous classes, nutrition and obesity, statistics. Don't get frightened about statistics. We have a marvelous teacher who will make you love it. I know you're probably thinking, how could I ever love statistics? Well, you have to take statistics to read medical literature and get the right idea about things, and our guy will make you love it. We've had students loving statistics for 5 years here at Wellness Farm Health. So anyway, statistics, biology, whole repertoire of classes, the diet and lifestyle intervention course, which we've packaged with some other programs. You can get a great package deal, learning a whole lot about how to help people to regain their health and the business strategies needed to do it. So if you want to talk about that, send me an email at pampopper@msn.com. We can set up time for a phone chat and see if any of this stuff is for you. All right? So a couple topics. I'm going to start with dietary recommendations usually focus on food choices. Well, duh, that's what it's all about, right? But they don't focus much on how the food is to be eaten, like when and that sort of thing. And there's no question that eating health-promoting foods and eliminating or sharply reducing foods that are bad for you is a big deal, and you should do that. But research shows that there actually is something to how and when you eat in terms of your health outcomes. And I remember when I was writing the original Wellness 101 curriculum, we found a lot of studies showing that, for example, breakfast eaters eat less food, less calories throughout the day. So I already knew this, but here's some new info. A group of researchers looked at the eating habits of over 1,000 college students. And what they found is that students who prepared meals at home and ate at regularly scheduled times had a healthier diet than students who watched TV while they were eating, ate on the run, and ate more fast food. Students who ate breakfast and dinner ate less fast food, and they also ate more vegetables than those that did the on-the-fly type of eating. The regular meal eaters also consumed a lot less sugary beverages. So according to the authors, and I had read this too before this study, in other countries the focus is on some of this stuff. In other words, they're telling people clearly what to eat, just like we do here, although I have to say, I would say the dietary guidelines from the government, not so good. But in any case, in addition to talking about what to eat, other countries talk about eating patterns. So in Japan, for example, there is included advice to, quote, enjoy communication at the table with your family. They also say to participate in the preparation of meals and to eat at regular times. And that's almost a lost art here in this country. I talk to kids sometimes who eat Cheerios alone in their room for dinner, which first of all is amazingly sad to me. But second of all, misses the whole dynamic of the family dinner and that sort of thing. In Hungary, the dietary recommendations include advice to, quote, eat calmly, never eat when driving or at work. And I have to say, when I've spent time in Europe, Europeans do not walk down the sidewalk eating a sandwich and a piece of plastic and drinking. They sit at a restaurant or at their house and they sit down and eat, and they make it an occasion. I realize you can't always do that, but my gosh, a lot of people eat all of their meals sort of on the fly. So anyway, in other cultures, there's a little bit more focus on the culture of eating, the method of eating, than we have here in the United States. So we've observed this with our members here at Wellness Farm Health. A lot of times the reason why kids eat poorly is, again, they're eating by themselves in their room playing video games instead of at the family dinner table. Many of our overweight members, part of how they got to the place that they are is doing what we call disordered eating. What I mean by disordered eating is skip a meal, binge eat in response to restriction, not a lot of shopping for, planning for, meal prep type of stuff. And I remember being asked on a radio show one time, what was the hardest thing about helping people change their diets? And I think what the person thought I was going to say is giving up dairy or not eating so much sweet stuff. I said, I think the hardest thing is that in the United States we've gotten out of the habit of planning meals. I remember when I was, when I had kids at home and everything, making a plan for the meals for the week and then a grocery list, and everything was kind of organized, and we just don't do that so much in this country right now, and I think we need to get back to it. So I've always said it's a lot easier sometimes to understand what you should be eating than it is to break the habit of a lot of disordered eating patterns that have gone on for a lot of years. So anyway, it's of course what you eat, but when and how you eat. I'm a fan of 5 to 6 meals a day. We try to help people with disordered eating patterns get into schedules of eating like breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, dinner, mid-evening, sometimes even clock, timing it by the clock, and doing some planning and shopping and preparation too. All right, so next topic has to do with something I've spent a lot of time on, but the studies are becoming so incredibly clear on this issue. I'm just hoping one fine day I'm going to wake up and this whole mammography thing is going to be like a bad dream that happened for me and a whole lot of other people. So here's the scoop. Every year about 60,000 women in the United States are told that they have ductal carcinoma in situ, a very early stage cancer, air quotes, you'll see why I say that. It's sometimes referred to as stage 0. The diagnosis almost is always made with routine mammography, and women are told that if they don't get treated for it, it's going to turn into some deadly form of cancer. So of course, aren't we lucky that we found it through early detection? So almost all women undergo treatment. Many have a lumpectomy. A growing number of them are having mastectomy, and many are even opting for bilateral mastectomy in order to reduce the risk of developing breast cancer in the healthy breast. Surgery is followed by radiation in many cases, sometimes chemotherapy, and almost always with some type of hormone blockade like aromatase inhibitors or tamoxifen. But a new study shows that the treatment is useless and it doesn't change the outcomes. Now, for this particular research study, researchers looked at the biggest data set that's ever been examined for DCIS. Over 100,000 women followed for 20 years. So they can't complain the cohort wasn't big enough or the length of time wasn't long enough. Most had lumpectomies. The majority of those who didn't have a lumpectomy had at least one mastectomy. Almost none didn't get any treatment at all. The risk of death in that population was about 3.3%, death from breast cancer, which is exactly the same risk of death from breast cancer in the general population. So no benefit is what this is all about. So if DCIS were actually a precursor to invasive and life-threatening breast cancer, then catching it at that stage should reduce the risk of women developing metastasized or invasive breast cancer later. But that's not the case. Instead, the women who had the mastectomies were no better off than the women who had the lumpectomies, and the whole group together was no better off than the general population. I think this is just incredibly telling. Furthermore, some women who died of breast cancer have metastasized breast cancer while not having a recurrence in their breasts. Many of these women had had a mastectomy, and what the researchers said is most likely what had happened is at the time that the DCIS was diagnosed, the cancer had already metastasized, and so the removal of the breasts made no difference. We've known that breast removal doesn't make a difference for a long time. My colleague and friend John McDougall helped to get a law passed in Hawaii that doctors had to notify women that breast removal did not reduce their risk of dying of breast cancer before consenting to the procedure. So this goes back 30 years, more than 30 years ago, but this research confirms that. Now, since mammography has become a very common screening tool, the diagnosis of DCIS has increased, and it's estimated right now that about 25% of all breast cancer diagnoses are for DCIS. But in spite of the explosion of diagnoses, we're not having an epidemic of breast cancer, we're having an epidemic of diagnosis is what this really comes down to. About the same number of women, even though all these new people are being diagnosed, 240,000 a year are diagnosed with invasive breast cancer, and the death rate hasn't changed at all. So for these reasons, I've been advising women to just say no to mammography. I'm not the only person saying this. Peter Gotchke and the Cochrane collaboration have been advising women that the risk of being harmed is 3 times greater than the risk of being helped. And his book, Peter Gotchke wrote a great book called Mammography, Truth, Lies, and Controversy. And he tells the whole story about how he and his colleagues have been trying for decades to get the medical profession and the general population to understand this. A lot of resistance there. Another guy who talks about it a lot is Dr. Gilbert Welch, who wrote a great book called Should I Get Tested for Cancer? Maybe Not, and Here's Why. Well, it's time for things to change. It's unlikely that this is going to happen anytime soon. And the reason is mammography is a big business by itself, $8.3 billion a year in the United States. But what's even more important is all this treatment for cancer that mammography generates, billions and billions of dollars more. These people aren't going to give it up without a fight. As for the American Cancer Society, which is unfortunately still considered an expert source of information about cancer screening and treatment, Chief Medical Officer Otis Brawley says we need more research before changing anything, which just, how much more research, how many more studies, how many more women are we going to hurt? But to his credit, he said he was certain that treatment has been excessive and added, quote, "In medicine, we have a tendency to get too enthusiastic about a technique and overuse it. This has happened with the treatment of DCIS." Well, I think we need to back it up and stop diagnosing DCIS, tell women to say no to mammography. That's the answer to the question, or to the issue here. All right, that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you on Thursday with more news.